Hi friends, it's me Desiree with Clearday. Today we're going to play a game called Amounts. So I'm going to name an amount and you got to tell me things that you can get with that. Okay? So let's start with a dozen. What are some things that you can buy that come in a dozen? Think about that. If you go out, you go shopping, or you go to a store, what can you buy of things that come in a dozen? Eggs are one of them, right? You can buy eggs by the dozen. Or donuts, right? You can buy donuts by the dozen. All right. What are some things that you can buy in the amount of a bushel? If you're going to the store and you're ordering something, by the bushel, what are some things that you can get? What about apples, right? You could buy apples by the bushel. You can buy corn by the bushel. My favorite, oysters, right? We usually go down to the coast every year and we buy a couple bushels of oysters. Or you could buy a bushel of crabs. All right. What about the amount of a pound? What can you buy by the pound, right? You can get meat and other seafood, fish, by the pound. You can get a pound of butter. You could buy a pound of nails, right? You can get a pound of fat. All right. The next amount, a bunch. What can you buy bunches of? If you're going to the store and you're going to buy a bunch, what do you buy? You could get a bunch of bananas, right? Or a bunch of grapes, right? What about a gallon? When you go shopping and you're buying things by the gallon, what could you get by the gallon? What are some things? You can buy a gallon of milk, right? What about gas? If you have somewhere to go, places to be, you can get a gallon of gas. Ice cream. You could buy ice cream by the gallon. And lastly, water, right? You could buy a gallon of water. All right, what about a dose? What are you doing if you take a dose of something? What is that? Usually a dose correlates with medicine, right? Your dose, take your dose. What about an acre? What is the amount of an acre? What is that referring to usually? Usually an acre, it's regarding land, right? If you have land, you have acres, it goes by acres. What about a spool? What's the amount? A spool of what? What can you get by the spool? You can get thread, right? A spool of thread, or wire, or fishing line. All right, what about a keg? How much is that? What are you getting with a keg? A keg of what? It's usually a keg of beer, right? What about a ream? What's that amount? A ream of what? Getting a ream of paper, right? What is that? Usually 500 sheets? What about a closet? A closet of what? You have a closet full of clothes. Okay. What about the amount of a pack? A pack of what? What comes in a pack? You can get a pack of wild horses, a pack of chewing gum, a pack of cigarettes, or a pack of wolves. What about an ounce? What are things that you get in an ounce? What about an ounce of prevention? Or an ounce of gold, right? We measure gold in ounces. All right. What about a box? What are we getting in a box? A box of what? A box of cereal? What about a box of tissues? A box of crayons? A box of matches? Actually, matches could come in a pack too, a pack of matches, right? Or a box of chocolates. All right, what about a yard? What are things that you can buy by the yard? What about fabric? You can buy fabric by the yard. You can buy mulch by the yard. All right, our next amount, a cord. What can you get by the cord? A cord of firewood, right? A cord of firewood. All right, what can you get a ton of? By the ton, what are we getting? What can we get by the ton? Well, we can get a ton of bricks, a ton of coal, or a ton of work. All right, what about a barrel? What can we get by the barrel? Right? We can get a barrel of monkeys, a barrel of pickles, a barrel of oil, a barrel of laughs, and a barrel of beer. Right? All right, let's look at our next amount. A roll of. What can we get in rolls? Right? Like, what are some things that we can buy that come in rolls? What about tape? A roll of tape, right? What about a roll of paper towels or toilet paper? Right? We call them, we go by the roll. What about pennies and coins and quarters and nickels and dimes, right? A roll of, that comes in the coins. And then a roll of dice, right? The dice. All right. What about this amount? A house of cards, right? A house of cards. All right. What about a mess? A mess of what? What can we get a mess of? A mess of trouble, a mess of vegetables, a mess of greens, and a mess of collards. I never heard that one before. What about a ladle? What can you get a ladle of? Ladles are usually used in what? Soups and stews, right? So a ladle of soup or a ladle of stew. All right, what about a stick? What can we get a stick of? We can get a stick of gum, right? A stick of butter or a stick of dynamite, right? All right, what can we get by the bale? A bale of what? What are we getting by the bale? We can get hay by the bale or cotton, right? Cotton by the bale. All right, what about a skein? A skein of what? A skein of yarn or wool. All right, what about a pair of? How much is a pair? What are we getting? What comes in pairs? Aces, stockings, and socks, right? A pair of socks. All right, what about a library? This isn't an amount, right? A library of books. All right. What about a kettle? A kettle of what? What can you get by the kettle? You can do a kettle of water or a kettle of fish, right? What about a string of? How much is that? What can you get? A string of lights, right? Or a string of pearls. All right. What about a deck? What can you get with a deck? How much is that? We do a deck of cards, right? deck of cards. All right. What about a semester? How much is that? Where do we measure with semesters? Usually a semester is college, right? School, classes. All right. A piece of. What do you get a measurement out of a piece of? What is that amount? You can say a piece of my mind, right? A piece of candy or a piece of advice. What about a shadow of? How much is that? What's a shadow? A shadow of what? A shadow of a doubt. All right, let's look at this amount. A pan. A pan of what? A pan of brownies, a pan of water, or a pan of gold, right? We call it panning for gold. All right, what about a packet? What are some things that come in packets? We can get our yeast, right? A packet of yeast. What about a spoonful? What do we take by the spoonful usually? We usually get sugar, right? By the spoonful of sugar, or honey, or medicine, right? What about a grain? What are some things that we can get a grain of? We can get a grain of salt, a grain of wheat, a grain of truth, a grain of sand, and a grain of rice, right? All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's amounts, and we'll see you next time.